Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in and listening. And we're back on the air. I had a trip to Vermont for personal business, and got back. The driving was horrendous, and I don't know what to say to people other than traveling these days is not what it was a long time ago. Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Oh, hey, Stuart. Glad you're back. And matter of fact, I kind of wondered if you had gone up to that part of the country to look for that super volcano they're talking about up there that's emerging.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that was there, and read it just before we left. But that we're getting volcano. Remember No Eyes, that ne'er-do-well, erstwhile Native American lady who said that volcanoes would start to fire off, and then extinct volcanoes would begin to fire off, then more or less super volcanoes would begin to fire off, and ultimately volcanoes would form in areas never known for volcanic activity. And when I read that article, I'll get into it a little bit maybe later, but it reminded me of the Book of Enoch, and I want to read just a short part. Folks, this volcanic activity, I think, probably had a lot to do with the extinction level events of the past, because I just want to read verse 6, chapter 1. Great fear and trembling shall seize them, and that's even the angels, the fallen angels, as well as the humanity, even to the ends of the earth. The lofty mountains shall be troubled, the exalted hills depressed, melting like a honeycomb in the flame. The earth shall be immerged, and all things which are in it perish, while judgment shall come upon all, even upon all the righteous. So, but to the righteous shall he give peace. So, really what we're being told here is sort of what like the Lord worded when he said that nations would be thrown into the lake of fire, which obviously is the magma which lies beneath. And now science is just beginning to figure out that magma everywhere. So this is a huge thing in New England, although they say it's going to be, of course, billions of years before anything happens. But their timing is way off, always has been. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on volcanic-wise. And, Larry, you had something about earthquakes. I remember that that near-do-well Sorcher Fall, about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, issued a special report from Russian scientists warning American scientists that the North American plate was actually breaking up. And now you've got a series of earthquakes at the same depth. You want to get into that as long as we're in this area?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, actually. We've been watching a lot of, earthquake activity, especially down around the Gulf of Mexico, and that's exactly what Stan Dale warned of years ago. And today I posted a very interesting string of earthquakes that were at the same depth, about 5 kilometers in depth. And they began down by the Gulf of Mexico, down around, actually it was in southern Texas. They had a 3.0 with swarms close to Karnes, Texas. And then if you follow that line up, had a 3.0 in north central Oklahoma, and this was northeast of Kingfisher, Oklahoma. And what's so interesting about that one is that's the area years ago you and I did radio shows and talked about where the methane was escaping in the Canadian River around Kingfisher, Oklahoma, spewing up into the air, and we talked about that. And then this goes on up to 2.9 in central or north central Wyoming, around Thermopolis. And it's so interesting that this is all about the same depth and goes all the way from about the Gulf of Mexico in Texas, there in southern Texas, all the way up to Wyoming. And I just almost have to believe that these fractures are occurring at these certain depths for something that's coming an event later on. It's hard to get out of my mind. Remember that movie 10.5 Apocalypse, where that U.S. cracked in two, actually, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico?
Well, when you see movies like that, they're trying to tell people something. This is a gentleman's way of warning people. The elite really do think of themselves as gentlemen, and they always give warnings before they do something, and then they do it. And a lot of this stuff that they give warnings on are movies out of Hollywood. And I've read a lot of stuff about Hollywood movies and who's behind a lot of it. And it's just another propaganda arm for the New World Order boys and girls who are just, can't wait to get their New World Order going. But it just seems that the disquieting in the core of the earth, this earth expansion, is rapidly coming to the fore now with rifts, sinkholes, huge sinkholes now, and it not slowing down, it's increasing. So I don't think any area particularly is going to be safe from any of this. Probably some are a little safer than others, geologically speaking. But we're headed into a time of trouble. Speaking about a time of trouble, normally I would not. I spoke to you, Larry, about it. This lady is an astrologer, and that is a no-no for the Christian world, basically. It's basically New Age concepts. And from time to time, if somebody sends me a link, I'll listen to what they have to say and compare it back to the scriptures. And what I always look for is, how do I word this? Synchronicity, I guess, would be the best word, where things are coming together approximately at the same time from many, many different areas, like the Native American prophecies, the New Age prophecies, ancient prophecies, biblical prophecies. Do they agree basically on where we are and what is about to occur? Well, this was kind of interesting. I'm not asking anybody to believe it. I just want people to put it in the back of their minds as a possibility. Anyway, the gist of this thing was, and the reason I'm a little bit suspicious is she talks about an arrival. She talks about a cosmic conscious ascension, which is totally New Age, strong delusion stuff, and a connection with it to the arrival. So anyway, this is what was said. July through August, but predominantly focusing on July, is going to be a time of trouble, a time of loss, depressions, many suicides, stock market crash, earth changes, hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, possible tsunamis, didn't know, just water and drowning, earthquake increasing, volcanic activity increasing. Not a good time for people to be traveling either in the air or on the ground. Riots and revolutions and governments being overturned. The world in upheaval, chaos. Remember the motto of the Masons, mystery, order out of chaos. A time of transformation to a higher consciousness. That's totally New Age. That is a strong delusion, a part of it, along with the arrival. Scandals will be revealed. that'll be really shocking to everyone. People are angry, and it all's going to come to a head. Then we have the arrival, spirit beings, alien contact. I guess I said it, lots of suicides, great purging, and this would be the Native American, of course, the time of the great cleansing, time of purification, and the time of purging. So it's very, very interesting that a lot of this we've talked about right along, actually, and warned about, that we are approaching a time of trouble. Now, here's what's really interesting. There is a lunar eclipse. It's a total eclipse, blood red moon, on July 27th. Now, we won't see it in America. Tu B'Av ends the love feast of all the feast days. This one, rabbis consider very mysterious, actually. They don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's called Tu B'Av, and it ends on the 27th of the same time that the total lunar eclipse. People who are in large parts of Australia, Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America will be able to see it. Totality will last for 103 minutes, making it the longest eclipse of the 21st century. So I find that kind of interesting because Tu B'Av is like America's Valentine's Day. It's a time when the young women, all dressed in white, dance in the vineyards, and the Israeli males go there to seek out and find a wife. Sounds an awful lot like Jesus Christ coming for his bride, and coming at a time when no one would expect it. I'm not saying that the rapture will occur then. It's just symbolic. That feast day is very symbolic. It's because it's a love feast, and Jesus' love for his people. So anyway, it just seems very, very mysterious that a lot of this stuff is all pointing to the same thing, and now we have this new election which we want to get into in Mexico. Anyway, enough of that. Larry, where do you want to start?
Well, I guess we could start with the new Torah code information if you want to.
Yes. What's the latest that you can even report on?
Yeah, the latest one that he did, and then I'll go into the research part of a new one. Barry Rothman ran a report June the 28th, Torah Code Research, on Maxine Waters encourages violence. And there's 9 wordings in this matrix that he found. And number 1, Maxine Waters. Number 2, impeacher. Number 3, black. Number 5, people. Number 6, will surely die. Number 7, black again. Number 8, C. And number 9, president. And, of course, he ran that Torah code after Maxine Waters' request to all the left to go after Trump's White House staff and supporters, and they began to do that, actually. And then they had that shooting at what's kind of interesting, at the Capitol, there in Annapolis, Virginia. Maryland. And that's when he ran that and got those words. So I found that was kind of interesting, how that showed up. He ran another one, though, over the last day or so. I had made contact with Barry and asked him to run a code or begin a code on this, I guess you pronounce it, Oumuamua is the best I can pronounce it. And I did that because, we've talked about this on and off for some time now, even before they named it. This is this long, cigar-shaped, what they called originally interstellar object. And since then, every week it's something new coming out on it. As a matter of fact, they just recently came out with the fact that it's gone around the sun, whipped around the sun, and here's a couple of just quick posts. Yahoo News said Oumuamua interstellar object moving at 196,000 miles per hour whips around the sun. It's a high-speed interstellar object, and which is kind of shocking. And then there's another post, if I can find it here, Yahoo News, another post on it says, bizarre interstellar visitor whizzed through Earth's solar system last year. Of course, now we know it's still there. It says, now scientists think it's becoming a comet again. And, I posted, and I sent you some images, I think, with along what I sent Barry Rothman. But, you and I both, talked about this or mentioned it on a number of shows, over the last months. And we also included some talk about the Mona Lisa crashed spacecraft on the moon. And, everybody should be familiar with that. I posted it today, a link to that on ViewZone if people just want to go there and read about that. But what's so interesting is I posted that information and put it up with the latest images of this Oumuamua, and ironically, what's going zipping through our solar system, and they're calling a interstellar object, which means it's not originally from this solar system. It looks very, very much like the images of this crashed craft, this ancient ship on the moon. And I had asked Barry if he would check into any coding possibly with that strange, odd name. And it's Oumuamua is how you spell it, actually. And guess what? And I sent you a copy of what he sent me on it. I got a quick reply back from Barry Rothman, and he said he found two words so far. He said Oumuamua and spaceship. And he says Oumuamua entering our solar system is at the same absolute skip as the word spaceship. And that's absolutely shocking. And he says he's got to do more research on it. Matter of fact, I've been on the phone with him today and talked to you about some things that's ongoing with Barry Rothman that we may get into in a later show. But what's your opinion, Stuart? What do you think? This is really interesting that it's in the Torah codes.
Well, you may remember that the Russians sent a probe to Mars, and they were approaching Phobos. And the last picture that they took before they lost contact with the spacecraft and never got it back was that of an elongated, cigar-shaped, I guess you could call it cigar-shaped, object, which obviously was under intelligent control because of the way it reacted. But when you talk about the Mona Lisa and then you compare it to this object that came through, they look very, very much alike. And there are those scientists who have come out and said they wonder if these are just disguised. In other words, they don't look like our spacecraft do. They disguise them to look like Phobos, or those who claim that Phobos might even be kind of a spacecraft of some type. Nobody knows, but it's just very, very strange. And the Mona Lisa story continues to be out there. Let's put it that way. It continues to be there, and it does have some traction. And when you get into things like Alternative 3 and what's going on Mars, with Trump's announcement of a space force, which has been up there for a number of years already, as you and I already know, and they're beginning to come public with this thing. So, yeah, I think it all ties together. We're not alone. The Bible has said right along, we're not alone. We never were alone. Satan, for example, was in the garden with Adam and Eve. And we've had the fallen angels have come and visited, and Lord knows how many of God's angels have been with us right along. So I don't know why people are so reluctant to believe, I guess maybe the answer, to that we are not alone and that we do have visitors. And we're heading for an arrival, which is very interesting in view of what this lady had to say about all the trouble that's coming, but in it was an arrival and intermixing with spirit beings. So when you put it all together, there's something very, very strange going on our planet. And I've often thought from a biblical perspective that planet Earth is the last turf war, so to speak, where Satan is digging in his heels and is going to try to defeat Jesus Christ at the second arrival and his coming to Earth to take up residence. And I think I remember, and you can correct me, Larry, if I'm wrong, but didn't Stan Dale make mention of the fact that a lot of this technology that they're working on has but one ultimate purpose, and that is to attempt to defeat Jesus Christ coming here? I can't imagine anybody being that stupid trying to defeat the Creator, but hey, arrogance goes a long ways to enhance stupid, I guess one could say. What do you think?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And what's also interesting is during Barry's conversation that I had with him, he said he was getting a lot of probes, matter of fact, hundreds of probes from three-letter agencies probing into his research on time and time reversal. And, all of that information, it's very in-depth. You've read some of it. And,
yes.
It all began, remember, with the individual approaching him at the library, and he had a
yes.
book. And I won't go into all that now because it's elongated, but what's so interesting, too, is Skywatch TV just came out with a really interesting, on June the 28th, article, and let me read you the headline here and get your opinion of it. And it's very interesting because over the last year or so, you remember we've been doing a lot of the Mandela effect
yes.
talks and mentioning that, and really a lot of people, even Augusto Perez, even though we don't endorse the term Mandela effect particularly, but something is causing glitches or upsetting history, if you will, to small degrees. I don't mean anything big that I know of, but little small things are happening. But let me read you this article. Just the headline here. It said, and this is, of course, Skywatch TV, which is from Tom Horn. It says, closing in on God's relationship with time, ? This quantum theory predicts that the future, Omega, might be influencing the past, Alpha. And that's by the Skywatch editor. And they're looking into reports of possible Mandela effect similarities that are being reported over the last couple of years around the globe. And what do you think, Stuart? Something is going on.
Well, we don't, how do I word this? We really don't understand time-space continuum or space-time continuum. We don't even understand what time is. We don't even understand what space is. What is it? How do you describe it even? So space-time continuum is kind of, I've always viewed it like this. It's kind of a prison in which the creation, if you go into the New Testament, where the creation is placed under a curse at the fall of mankind way back in Genesis, and that curse will maintain, and part of that curse is the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, and everything runs down. The other part of that denies evolution, of course, is the law of like begets like. I can't think of the name of it right offhand. Homogenesis. The law of homogenesis, that like begets like, unless there's outside interference. So, who created mankind, animals, and whatnot that can see, have eyes to see, ears to hear, a mind to think, etc., etc., kind of proving that there are no known variations from these two laws. And when omega point is reached, everything changes. It says that the whole creation will be released from its bondage, and a whole new earth and a whole new heaven will be created. So whether the future messes with the past, I really don't know. I would only say that biblical prophecy, Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, all of them, Jesus verified and confirmed them as being accurate and said not one tittle, not one jot will depart from any of what was said until all be fulfilled. So they might be able to tinker a little bit here and there with minor things, but I cannot imagine that the Lord would allow man to go back into the past and try to change things, which I firmly believe CERN was attempting to do. Punch a hole and go back into the time where they could, if they could do that, they could eliminate Jesus Christ by simply getting rid of Mary. You can go back and you can rearrange things like, what was that movie trilogy, Back to the Future, which I really loved that trilogy. Scientists said it was probably the best of all movies to show what happens if you begin to tamper with the past, because you will alter the future. But we know from the Bible that the past, present, and future are all here. We just are traveling in the present. Past is still there, the future is there. And although it may be kind of hard to comprehend, the future knows everything that everybody's going to do, when they're going to do it, and you cannot ultimately change the future in the sense that whatever changes we make, the future still knows about it and adjusts itself. And the future, of course, is biblical prophecy. Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. Prophecy is about the future. And we're watching the final unending, and I think the scientists of the world, the rich men of the world, are getting desperate because they know that we're coming up on the end of things. They know it. James says they withhold. How does it worded in James? Where they know that the future and what's coming is there. They gather themselves riches to try to get through the times of trouble. Hence, I think alternative 3, Iron Mountain. All those reports are really nothing more than the rich men of the earth attempting to escape the coming judgment of the Lord by going to Mars, by going to the moon. It's not going to work. I think the Lord plainly says, I don't care if you go to the depths of the ocean, I'm going to go down there and get you. If you go to the Mars or Venus or Jupiter or wherever you think you're going to go, I'm going to get you. You're not going to escape. To me, the attempt to escape judgment is lunacy. I don't see why anybody would even believe that they could escape those kind of judgments, particularly the Omega judgment. And I don't know. What do you think? I just, when I look at this thing that Barry did on Space Force, he's got Trump and Mars and wars are showing up in the code. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that's really interesting. As a matter of fact, he was probed really heavily after he posted that, and of course I posted it also on my blog, and he informed me that some people probing had launched to a probe off my blog. So he you know, kind of a heads up. There's a lot of probing going on out there by people in high places. What was interesting as you were talking too was that there's a classic movie about you know, doing something in the from the future to the past that changes the future, and that was the movie Deja Vu with Denzel Washington. That
yes.
was really a classic, you know.
Yeah, and that I can't believe that would be allowed. It might be allowed on a minor basis, but it could never be allowed on a major basis simply because Bible prophecy would be undone. And Bible prophecy cannot be undone. And I do believe that a lot of this stuff in interest of government officials has to do with trying to escape judgment. They know perfectly well this is coming. The rich men of the earth know in James that this is coming. They heap together treasure for the last days. Well, why does the Bible say that the rich men are heaping treasure together for the last days unless the rich men of the earth know there are a last days or omega point is reached? They know this is coming. And I think this is one of the reasons why there's such a hatred for Israel. Because Israel is the timepiece for the Lord, for planet Earth. And this business of the embassy being delayed again, I mean, the embassy is there, but it's not being allowed, right? Is that what you've heard? That the embassy was delayed?
Well, what I heard on that, Stuart, was that Trump had signed the agreement to allow Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, and also the transfer of the new U.S. Embassy, which they opened and had an official opening, but then Trump signed a waiver of that same act involving the embassy for another 6 months and did not, in other words, did not fund the move of the ambassador from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and did not actually give authorization for the embassy and personnel themselves to move to the new embassy. So it's kind of a bait and switch, I guess you could say. Yeah, we've got a new embassy in Jerusalem, a new United States embassy, but it's not open yet. I mean, I don't know how to tell people about that. It's kind of a bait and switch in a way. But what's interesting is the fact that there are reports, and these are rumors, of course. There are reports that some in the New World Order are expecting. And the reason they've been battling Trump and Putin getting together is they believe Trump and Putin will eventually double-cross the New World Order and move against them. And that's what they're afraid of. As a matter of fact, they're really afraid, Stuart, because the whole world set up basically the EU to take over. And now it appears that Trump and Putin are working closer together than Trump and the EU. And this puts a lot of danger on the New World Order folks.
Yeah, the argument of Trump versus the New World Order is the New World Order wants a supreme government and everybody locks underneath, whereas Trump wants a global kind of conglomeration of nations that each retain their sovereignty and they simply work out their trade deals. And that's where the big rub is, because I believe the Bible teaches us that we are going to go under the globalist concept of a United Nations global government where the nations may exist, but their sovereignty is taken away. You'll find that in Daniel. And I think that's where we're headed, and I think they're going to win. I don't know how long the Lord is going to keep Trump in office, hopefully for a while yet. But at the same time, we don't know. I mean, the left has, how do I word this? They've got to move, Larry. things are really starting to close down, even in the legal terms of things. The latest Search of Fall article is very, very interesting about the legalities and how Trump is actually winning on some of these things from a legal viewpoint. So if he's winning on other viewpoints and also on the legal aspect from the deep state and exposing all of these corruptions, don't they have to have a major false flag to stop this? I think they do, of some sort. I don't know what it is, but something has to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. And let me ask you this, because this kind of brings us to the new president of Mexico. You want to tell the people who that is and what's going on?
Well, I don't know I can't pronounce his name, but anyway, he is a far, far left communist. And we're getting different reports. I was watching Fox News, and they said that Trump congratulated him and hoped we could all work together. But this guy is a rank communist. He said he would allow communist naval operations from both Russia and China there. He would allow missiles on land, and he would flood America with refugees. Now, this is alternative media that's reporting all of this. If this is true, and Search of Fall, once again, has said that very strangely, we are amassing these ship armadas off Mexico. And she's claiming we are going to go to war with Mexico. Now, if I was Donald Trump, and I knew that this guy was a rank communist, and I knew he was going to allow missiles to be pointed to America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and flood our borders with people, refugees, that's an act of war. So I don't know whether there's anything true to this or not. Hal Turner's radio, World News, made reference to it. So it does have some legs that we may be on the verge of trouble, which is kind of what this woman said, that trouble is going to come in areas we would have never suspected and in ways we never would have expected. But it was coming anyway, and we should be ready for it. Economic troubles, riots in the streets, and by the way, wasn't Oregon, didn't they have a riot out there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was Antifa beginning again in the streets, and that's what we've been being warned about for some time is the left going back to the streets. This is what's interesting, Stuart, and I'd like your opinion on this. It's so interesting that during Obama's time, there were some threats of a possible military coup against Obama. Never came. And there was also threats of a revolution or a civil war beginning against Obama, but that never happened either from the right. So suddenly here we are thrust into a new president, Trump, in 2016's election, and now, a year and a half later, we're facing the same threats of a coup, from the deep state, et cetera. Also rioting and protest in the streets, but this time it's coming from the left, which of course know is more accurate because that's a communist coup occurring with this nation, and we're having the same type coups. The new president, and by the way, I guess you pronounce his name. His name is Lopez Obrador. Was just voted in by a landslide in Mexico, and he is a leftist, left-wing socialist president and has made some deep threats against the U.S., and he's supposedly anti-Trump. Now, I did hear also qualify that Trump did talk to him today, and he was quieter during that conversation. So we don't know where that's going exactly, but Stuart, this is my question. Is it possible that for years we have really derided and give Israel a hard time because of their troubles with Gaza? And is it by chance that suddenly we may be facing our own Gaza in America, except instead of Gaza, it will be Mexico on our border, maybe with missiles and rockets that would be pointed at us?
Well, yeah, that's the way the Lord works. That's his sense of humor. We would not view it as a sense of humor, but to the Lord it is. Okay, this is what you give out, and this is what you're going to get back. Covert intelligence sources inside Mexico, the Obrado or however campaign confirmed the following. Mexico is to join BRICS, the economic alliance. In other words, he's against the dollar. 2, Mexico to allow foreign missiles on their territory aimed at USA to intimidate USA over border enforcement. 3, instructions are already being issued from campaign headquarters to flood the U.S. border with immigrants. 4, overt contact at public campaign events with known drug cartel big shots. Mexico's oil industry is being used as a bargaining chip with talks right now about China being given first right of refusal to all Mexican oil sales. If he carries through, if this is real, this is from Hal Turner's World News, if this is actually real, those basically are acts of war, particularly the invasion of our border. And maybe this is why the Democrats want to get rid of ICE all of a sudden. You know, that just popped up several weeks ago. Let's get rid of ICE. Well, if we have this, I think this is the final invasion of Jeremiah. You know, where the Lord said, I will fill you with caterpillars as men, and they will take up arms against you. And most of the people coming across the border are of military male age, military age. So what we're watching is a fifth column invading the United States, getting ready to take up arms. This has actually been going on for years and years. I know that for a fact because I got a call from a Catholic nun down along the border who told me that people were coming in. She was kind of running a halfway house or whatever you would call it, kind of a stepping stone for people coming across. And they were showing her maps of where they were supposed to go, take up residence, and when the time come, they would cause trouble, which is in Isaiah, book of Isaiah, against the United States. But, of course, people are being told that America's not in prophecy, never was in prophecy, and they're being lied to because we are in prophecy. In fact, we cover a major role of it. And now I'm getting reports, you know, we got the Mexican problem, North Korea. We're getting absolute positive proof that Kim is accelerating his nuclear programs. Have you heard any more about that?
Well, we have, and what's interesting is the fact that people really didn't look very closely at how Kim got, to that meeting, with Trump, and he was actually flown there by China. That's who flew him there, and he's had meetings with China, at least 2 meetings since then. And so we have to assume he's being directed by the Chinese, who really basically are at war with us already, over the Yellow Sea and those bases. And of course, there we go again back to the Chinese wanting to change the dollar and use another currency. And this is ongoing, but there is reports that Pompeo was called to the White House, I believe it was yesterday, and has scheduled, I suppose, the day after the 4th. I believe it's the 6th when Pompeo is supposed to be in North Korea or thereabouts, and actually tried to find out what is up with this deal, and if Kim Jong-un is trying to back out or circumvent the discussion that he and Trump had. So that's a danger sign. immediately. And at the very same time, we've got to deal with Mexico growing up. And also, I don't know if you've seen the report, but the carrier group, the Harry S. Truman carrier group, has now been sent to the Atlantic from the Mediterranean because of Russian submarines probing off of our shores in the Atlantic. So we're surrounded, Stuart. I know a lot of people think that nothing's going on, but this may really be a hot summer.
I think it's going to be a very hot summer in more ways than one. Here's a headline from that ne'er-do-well Sorcher Fall. Pentagon notifies Russia of impending combat operations as 5 massive U.S. Navy aircraft carrier groups prepare for Mexican invasion. And she goes into some of the reason why all this is going to happen. Is kind of interesting because all of a sudden, remember all those equipment and troops that were going into Norway?
Yeah.
They're, according to reports, they're coming back home.
Oh.
So nobody really knows why that is. And then we have a very ominous report. Dave Hodges reported on it. See if I can find it right away. It's about, let me read you his headline. OSHA documentation proves FEMA is importing hydrogen cyanide. There's only one possible use. That's to kill people. Gas them, just like Germany did. Nazi Germany at the concentration camps. This would be FEMA camps. Yesterday, based upon the word of a trusted FBI informant, this is Dave Hodges, I published the fact that FEMA had previously imported hydrogen cyanide from Brazil starting back in 2011. Because FEMA feared discovery, they began to label the containers as anything but other than what they were. Many people chose not to believe that report. I have discovered OSHA documentation which completely validates the claim. Further, based upon my claim, 2 readers of the Common Sense Show sent me similar documents which validates the claim that FEMA is stockpiling deadly gas which has been used in warfare to execute prisoners in Nazi concentration camps. FEMA does not engage in warfare against foreign countries. Therefore, this gas could only have one purpose: to kill FEMA camp detainees. Now, I know an awful lot of folks out there don't even believe that FEMA camps exist. Let me assure you, they not only do exist, there are hundreds of them. Many Walmarts have been filled with, how do I word this? They've been converted over to collection camps where local people are arrested, put into Walmart stores, and then they are either, I don't know if they're killed there or whatever, but from there they go to the FEMA camp for re-education. Don't forget Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, in her bid for the presidency, said that every American would have to attend a re-education camp. She said it.
Yeah.
She meant it. These people do exactly what other communist coups have done, and the American people, because they are refusing to do anything about this, are going to go through this. And there's going to be a massive genocide of the American people, which is why Deagle.com shows such a horrendous depopulation of the United States all the way through to 2025. Well, if you go 2025 and you subtract 7 years for Daniel's lost week, where do we come? 2018. And all this is beginning to happen. A lot of stuff is beginning to happen all over the country. It's just people aren't aware of it yet. What else you got? What's going on in Israel? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to mention it's also very interesting that we sent off a SpaceX rocket today. What are we taking to the International Space Station, Stuart? We are carrying an AI robot up there. Isn't that interesting? And when I was talking to Barry, he said there's a lot of AI, and of course that means artificial intelligence, ongoing that we are not even aware of. This is a really, really big deal, Stuart.
Yeah, I think it is, and AI is going to win out. Don't forget the movie that Schwarzenegger did.
Terminator.
Yeah, Terminator series, the whole series. People should really watch that, and they shouldn't be laughing at it. Schwarzenegger has told us a tremendous amount in his movies about what's coming. In Total Recall, for example, he brings out the social credits. And that was released long before China introduced their social credit system. But now it's taking place right here in the United States. I don't have time to get into it, but how do I say, police state activities in America are really, really coming to the fore and accelerating right under the people's nose, and they don't even know it. What else you got? We got. Well, let's go to Israel, because that seems to be a powder keg where war could start anytime.
Well, it does, Stuart, and as I was saying, it appears that Trump and Putin is working some kind of deal with Netanyahu involving Jerusalem. Now, we don't know where this is going. We don't have a clue exactly, but something is happening. But at the same time, militarily, this is the scenario that's going on at the moment. Russia claims that it has told Hezbollah and Iran to leave Syria, and they both refuse to do that and are pouring more troops in. And if the reports are true that I'm reading, there is really a armored wall, if you will, which includes Israeli tanks, Israeli artillery, Israeli rocket units, at least 150,000 plus troops on the Lebanese and Syrian border. And what's going on the other side of the border is that the Iranians, Hezbollah, and the Syrians are pushing a force of, there's close to 100,000 of them. 88,000, I believe, is the number, but, you don't really know. And between the Syrians, Hezbollah, and Iranian forces is 45,000 Syrian refugees caught in the middle, and the Syrians are pushing the refugees towards the border with Israel. Now, Israel has said that the refugees, they won't even cross the border. In other words, they are not going to allow one living being across the Israeli border. And what is I guess you could say, where's the X? The X mark is the Golan Heights. Now, I want to get your opinion here, because, Bill Koenig of Watch.org, that's yes. International news. Listen to this headline. It's very interesting, and I wasn't aware of this. Koenig says, will the West cede the Golan Heights to Assad, the psychopath in Syria? Question mark. And then he gives this, and I wasn't sure of this in history, but it says the ruins of medieval Nimrod fortress is in the northern Golan Heights inside Israel. What do you think, Stuart? Because it seems like everything is now focusing on the Golan.
Yeah, is Mount Hermon, is that part of the Golan at all? Do you know? I don't know I'm not too familiar with the layout of Mount Hermon, but I know it's close to the border. And, of course, Mount Hermon is where the arrival took place of the fallen angels. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all that Nimrod's castle or fortress would be right in that same area. As to whether we would force Israel, I can't imagine we would that Netanyahu would do that. But he might. Yeah. I mean, we're dealing with rogue players here. And,
well, at the same time.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, at the same time, I'd like your opinion on this. We do know and it's not talked about much, we do know of the large energy and oil find on the Golan. We're aware of that,
yes.
that under the Golan Heights is incredible energy resources, and maybe more so than actually the spiritual side of this and the location. It could be, you know, we talked about energy wars, and we certainly know those occur.
Yeah, I would say that almost all of this really either deals with currency or which ultimately deals in energy. And you're right. Under the Golan is a huge energy resource. And Stan Dale did a bunch of research on that and brought it to our attention that this may be an energy war and pipeline wars as to who's going to do what, when, and how. So, but it can disintegrate. All you have to have is one misstep, and you've got bad problems. And this could happen even if, let's say, the rich men of the earth don't want their war right now. They may get it if this is the timing of the Lord. This is the one thing they all forget. It's called the God factor. They don't really believe that God is in control of all of this and that he is running his agenda. And the rich men are only pawns in the game that he's playing. And, he sent his son, and people have rejected that. And they've rejected what the son told them to do. Even the Christians, by and large, have rejected it. So, we're headed for trouble. And I think we're beginning to see it already play out. Before we close, you mentioned something about a hurricane possibly forming down in the Gulf somewhere, or below the Gulf, or in the Pacific. What was that?
Well, I was just going to add one thing also to what you were talking about, Mexico and the oil wars.
Yes.
That may be very interesting information about Mexico trying to shut off our source of oil from Mexico, because about 2 days ago, Trump had a private conversation with the king of Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is increasing by millions of gallons of oil supplies to the U.S. So Saudi Arabia is trying to fill a hole, and we really didn't know what was going on. But maybe these threats from Mexico, that may be real, and Saudi Arabia may be about to try to help us in that. So that qualifies there. But no, I was talking about there appears to be a large type storm system off the Pacific coast down between Mexico and southern California. In that region that's building, and it also looks like something's forming in the Gulf. So we've just got to watch those areas.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a very, very bad year of weather and earth changes. Things are already accelerating rapidly, and I guess all one can do is kind of hang on, folks. Heads up, they're moving rapidly underneath, where you can't see what they're doing. But it's beginning to make sense that we might do something with Mexico. Who knows? It may all just be fake news. That's the problem, Larry. And a lot of this stuff is very, very hard to vet. So we like to report on it, but it doesn't mean it's going to come to pass, but there is something going on underfoot that's really serious, and the war in Israel is inevitable. It's coming, and it's going to come fairly quickly. And like this lady said, and it's only a possibility, that July could be a very, very troubling month. And anyway, Larry, thanks a lot for coming on. Any last word?
Oh, I would just tell people to continue to have yourself a separate system for hearing news such as shortwave, and be prepared.
Yep, that's about it, folks. It's a heads up. Be prepared, and hopefully we'll see you either Wednesday or Friday, depending on how things go. Anyway, good night. Thanks for listening.